cryptocurrency, DeFi, NFTs? Sounds confusing? BitLab Academy is here to help. We make it simple. Start investing in crypto, learn trading fundamentals, learn to mint and trade NFTs. Join our community today. Crypto for beginners, taught by the pros.
Welcome to Rice TVX. On today's Rice Report, I am joined by Bruce Fenton. He is a crypto OG, free market economist, cypherpunk capitalist, and he is also running for U.S. Senate in New Hampshire. Before we get into it, visit ricetvx.com and sign up for my mailing list so you never miss an update or new Rice TVX content. You will also find my various social media links and more. You can also find Rice TVX on Odyssey and Library, where I have a full catalog of my videos, post up extra content, and share other appearances. And you can also find Rice TVX on BitChute. I will include links in the video description for everything I just mentioned, as well as everything shared on today's video. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor and privilege of being joined by crypto OG, free market economist, and cypherpunk capitalist who just happens to be running for Senate in New Hampshire. I am joined by Mr. Bruce Fenton. Bruce, welcome to Rice TVX. How are you doing today?
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
I'm definitely looking forward to the conversation. I did have the privilege of interviewing Jeremy Kauffman, who is the founder and CEO of Library recently, to catch up with what was going on with the SEC library case, and also to kind of get some updates on his run for Senate. He happens to be running for Senate as a libertarian in the same, because there's only 2 Senate positions, but he's running against you, I'm thinking.
Yeah, we had a debate the other day, but we agreed on everything. So we just changed it from debate to a discussion, and we just sat there and talked about how much we agreed.
and that's got to be interesting for people watching a discussion, a debate, because I mean, aside from the fact that you guys are both into cryptocurrency and early adopters, he was a libertarian, you're a Republican. So, and I want to get into the Republican thing here in just a little bit, but for people who, because one thing about my channel, Bruce, is I'm not just a crypto centric channel. I have 3 different shows. I cover a lot of different stuff. So not everybody is really immersed in the cryptocurrency world. For people who may be unfamiliar, or somebody who might be in New Hampshire that could vote for you, do you mind kind of explaining in your words who Bruce Fenton is?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a crypto person, as you mentioned. I got into Bitcoin about 9 years ago, full time, and starting in 2012. I used to run the Bitcoin Foundation, and I've run the Satoshi Roundtable, which is in its 9th year. And I've been really lucky. I've kind of had a front row seat, sort of met everybody in the industry. Prior to that, I was an investment person. I run an SEC registered broker dealer. I've been regulated as an investment person in the US for just about 30 years now. 29 years I've been registered. And in that career, I've done kind of, you name it, with finance, dealing with large clients, small clients. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I'm a leave me aloneist. I'm somebody who's tired of the government encroaching in our lives. And I'm somebody who cares a lot about freedom and free markets and human freedom and, sound economics and sound monetary systems. So, that's why I decided to jump in the race. I want to get government out of our lives, out of our wallets. I want to, have more freedom, more voluntary choice for everybody.
Well, since you said it, I mean, a lot of the things that you just said really sound to me to kind of come from what I would normally think of as a libertarian, kind of libertarian-minded focus. You're running as a Republican. What made you choose to run as a Republican, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I just registered as a Republican right before the announcement, so that I could be on the ballot. I've always been a libertarian, but you've got to be on the, you got to register with the party. So I registered as Republican like 3 weeks before announcing, and very much a Liberty Republican in the tradition of Ron Paul and Thomas Massey and Rand Paul and a whole bunch of Liberty reps right here in New Hampshire. We've really been winning with Liberty. Our Liberty Caucus, Free State Caucus in the State House, has over 100 members. So the way to win with liberty and libertarianism now is, I think, through the Republican Party. And I think that's going to be the new face of the Republican Party. I think the McConnell Republicans are a dying breed, and liberty is really popular.
Oh, no, I definitely agree. And I think Ron Paul just recently celebrated a birthday just a couple days ago. We're recording this on the 22nd of August. So happy late birthday to Mr. Ron Paul. He's definitely been an influence on a lot of my work and how I move forward, because I definitely identify in a cypherpunk mentality. And I don't usually have a lot of people who identify or try to represent that ideology. So in your words as well, if you don't mind, because I've noticed on your Twitter account that you're a self-proclaimed cypherpunk stockbroker, and on your brucefenton.com website, it says, where did I see it at? There was another little listing here. I wrote down some notes and I can't.
It's on there. Cypherpunk for sure.
Cypherpunk capitalist, I think is what it said.
Yes. Yeah,
So
I was going to get t-shirts that said that. I wanted to get those t-shirts. I got to ask about those. I think it'd be a cool t-shirt. Just say Cypherpunk capitalist on it. But as far as I know, I'm the only U.S. U.S. Senate candidate to ever use the word cypherpunk in a Senate debate, which I did just the other day.
Yeah, I would definitely think so. I don't think I've heard that term being used in politics before at all. So I'm curious, what to you is a cypherpunk stockbroker or a cypherpunk capitalist? Because I usually think of coders,
yeah,
and things to that effect, like your Satoshi Nakamoto. What is that?
Yeah, cypherpunk to me is somebody who follows the Cypherpunk Manifesto, which basically says people who believe that code, particularly encryption, can make the world a better place by allowing people to control what secrets they keep and what secrets they reveal. So that's a very cypherpunk, principle. And it does say in the Cypherpunk Manifesto, cypherpunks write code. So I think kind of writing code is sort of one of the core functions. I don't really write code. I use a loophole. You don't have to write code well. But I think it's more about promoting the code. And I've certainly never written a line of Bitcoin code, but I think it's a very cypherpunk activity to kind of promote Bitcoin, which I certainly have done. So that's to me what a cypherpunk is. And then I just happen to be a licensed stockbroker also, and I'm a capitalist too. So I kind of like using that term, cypherpunk stockbroker. I'm pretty sure I'm the only person in America to use that, because you can't legally call yourself a stockbroker in the United States unless you're licensed, and I don't think anybody else who's licensed calls themselves a cypherpunk. So I think cypherpunk ideals are great, and I hope more people read the manifesto and kind of understand what it's all about, because I think it's great stuff, and I really do think it makes the world a better place.
Well, I mean, since you mentioned it, I had to go ahead and pull it up, and I will include a link down below if people want to check this out. It was written on March 9th, 1993 by Eric Hughes, a Cypherpunk's Manifesto. So I'll definitely have that link down below.
It's short. It's only like a page and a half, easy to read.
And I appreciate you taking the time to explain it. And I definitely hope that not everybody who wants to consider themselves a cypherpunk or defending those ideologies has to be a coder. Because obviously a lot of these coders aren't the most socially friendly individuals. So I think, to have people as a spokesperson, to have people that are advocates for these technologies, I think are equally as important as the individuals that are creating them, in my opinion. So,
yeah.
So I commend you for taking that even into the political realm. That's really interesting.
So yeah, I mean, code and decentralization is a great way to make the world a better place. That's the way to do it.
100%. I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's definitely a time and a place for centralization. I've started to learn more and more. I can't be a complete decentralization maximalist, but there are definitely certain things that need to remain decentralized, and the idea of a decentralized cryptocurrency that enacts as a currency definitely needs to be decentralized, in my opinion. So what made you ultimately decide to run for Senate?
It's mainly about where the world is right now. I think that we're in a fourth turning, a time of epic change, the kind of time that every 100 years or so we have in humanity, where everything sort of changes, borders change, money changes, who people trust changes. This is the kind of thing that's happened a lot in history. And I think it's clear we're in a time like that now. And so I think that our world is going to get shaken up. I think the last couple of years is just a warm up. I think it's going to be even more unrecognizable in 2 years, 3 years from now versus how it was a couple of years ago. which is quite a bit of a radical change. And I want to make sure we get it right. You know, I think we're going to have a lot of important votes over the next 6 years, and we could go down the path of tyranny and central control and authoritarianism, or we go down the path of human rights and freedom and the Constitution. And so I want to be in there to make sure we make those right votes and embrace our best values.
I love that, man. I love that. And you actually supremely impressed me when you mentioned The Fourth Turning. Have you recently read that book?
Yeah, it's a big cornerstone about my campaign. I used to mention it at every campaign event, but lately I've been doing a lot of shorter ones, so I haven't had time. But, you know, if I have a 10-minute speech or something, I always begin by exactly what I just said. We're in a fourth turning. I talk about Strauss and Howe in the book, and that we're in these times of epic change. You know, it's an epic shift in the way the world works. And this happens all the time. And it's times like nobody alive has ever seen before.
No, I would definitely agree. And I'm very fascinated by the book. Neil Howe's still alive. Strauss, unfortunately, has passed away. The book was written back in the early 90s, mid 90s. 86?
96.
96. Okay, so mid 90s. And then recently, in case you haven't seen it, and I'll also include a link for anybody who's interested in seeing, there's an interview with a guy named George Gammon with Neil Howe, which is great. And I love George Gammon. He's been on the show before. And then also, oddly enough, it was Tony Robbins who just recently did some sort of an event with him, and they spoke all about the fourth turning. And it really surprised me that someone like Tony Robbins was really, that this was something that he was, because a lot of the things he pushes out and promotes is very positive. A lot of personal development and things like that. And there's not really much that you can say that's positive about a fourth turning, except for what happens after the fourth turning, unfortunately. And but also, I think being prepared for that is very pivotal. And it's interesting that you want to run for political office during a fourth turning.
Yeah, we got to get it right. You know, it's interesting. Yeah, Tony Robbins has always been good at trying to understand change and be prepared and be realistic, you know. So I don't see it as being negative to understand these times we're in. It is very scary because I think that we're going to have bloodshed and maybe global war and a lot more turmoil, probably a Great Depression. We're probably going to have starvation. We're going to be facing some serious stuff, the kind of things that I don't think anybody alive has really faced, or very few people have seen the kind of things that we're going to see in our world coming up in the next few years. And so that is scary, but you know, there's a lot of positives about it as well. You know, you can always do as well as you can. You know, there's going to be great inventions made, where there's going to be people building the new world for the future. I'm excited to build a new world for the future. I want to make it better, and we can do that together. We can be there to be, you know, it's said it's an old ancient curse to say, may you be born in interesting times, but it can also be a blessing. Who wouldn't have wanted to be alive during the American Revolution? You might have gotten shot by the British, but isn't that a little bit better than just sitting here and watching the Kardashians?
No, I agree. My four-time great-grandfather was served in the Revolutionary War, what would be equivalent to like 4 tours of duty. So I'm a son of the Revolution 100%, and definitely agree with the ideals of our Constitution and our founding fathers, especially from the anti-federalist perspective. And I don't know if you've seen the supposed FBI leaked documents that came out via Project Veritas.
Which ones are these? No, I probably not. I follow Veritas, but
I got to be careful about. So in the Second Amendment, they use a word "M" in addition to firearms, and you know what I'm talking about.
Militia. Yeah.
Well, I was trying to avoid saying it, but because of the YouTube algorithm. But so,
oh geez,
no, it's fine. It's fine. So I mean, you're running for political office, so if you can't have free speech, it's going to be a sad world that we live in.
Yeah, it really is. And I worry about that every day. You know, they censor and ban people. We've had content taken down. There was somebody else running for Congress who just got their account taken off of Twitter today.
Really?
You know, yeah, people have to edit their thoughts. It's a shame.
No, it totally is. It totally is. Well, I was getting off track with that. So let me go ahead and move over. I mean, again, I want to have a link down below for your website, brucefenton.com, which obviously has a lot of information. And obviously there's a lot with your About Me section. And you're an interesting gentleman, just looking at your business experience: CEO at Chainstone Labs, managing director at Watchdog Capital, founder of Atlantic Financial, co-host of the Satoshi Roundtable, and a New Hampshire farm owner, free market economist, open source contributor, angel investor, investment banking, father of 4, and then I like to add in the crypto OG part. So, and you've got a really interesting perspective on what you're doing with your views, your positions. One thing that I thought was cool, if people see at the very top left-hand side of the website, it says, see the filibuster here. You ended up doing on July 18th, you spoke about freedom and liberty for 33 straight hours.
I did, in honor of the Senate filibuster. I wanted to see how long I could go. I wanted to see if I could break Strom Thurmond's record. Strom Thurmond in 1957 spoke against the Civil Rights Act. He made it 24 hours. And so I figured I could beat him, and I did. I beat him by 9 hours. I spoke nonstop. Didn't really stop talking the whole time. I took some questions. The longest questions were like 5 minutes, and I just kept going. I took unfiltered questions from the public. So it was fun. It was a cool experience. And it shows that I could do it on the real Senate floor. If I can do that for fun, I know I can do it on the Senate floor. I'll go down there and I'll do a filibuster every week. If it'll help grind this tyranny to a halt.
No, I love it. 33 hours, though. I can't even think of myself talking that long. I mean, after sometimes doing multiple interviews, I get a little bit of a hoarse voice, so I can only imagine what 33 hours is like. I'm sure you took a nice little rest afterwards, right?
Yeah, my voice is still a little sore from it because I went right into a busy schedule right after, and I've been busy ever since. I've had like 3 debates since then, and a lot of podcasts, and then I'm meeting people on the street. I went to a doctor, actually. I wanted to check it out. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't damaging myself permanently. And the great news is he had me swallow a camera. But the good news is, which was not pleasant, but the good news is he says I'm fine. He said, it is what it is. But yeah, I've been talking a lot. It's been great.
I'm going to send you some information about something that I use myself. I don't know if you can see this. It's called Vocalese.
Oh, cool.
A lot of even singers, like metal vocalists, will use it. And it's got echinacea, ginseng, and honey. It's all natural. And it really helps a lot. So since you're going to be speaking a whole lot between now and early November, I definitely got to make sure you got your voice is being healed. So I'll send you some information on that.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem, man. And I also, as you were talking, I was sharing your YouTube channel. So I do encourage people to go check out your YouTube channel, and they can also follow you on Twitter to get more information about your campaign and other things that you're involved in at Bruce Fenton. Again, this will all be linked down below. Let's go over your positions. Like, what are the most important positions? Like, if you're talking to somebody who's in your voter range that it has the ability to vote for you, what are you telling them are the most important things that you're focusing on with your campaign right now?
I think the biggest few things are, one, what I call tyranny over the last couple years. I'm totally against this kind of medical tyranny, anything with movement passes, mandated vaccines, mandated masks, lockdowns. I'm totally against all of that. We still have some of it. You still can't come to the United States without an injection and these kind of things if you're not American. So I'd like to get rid of all of these kind of things and make sure they never ever come back. Broader than that is sort of overall the Constitution. I think that we're not doing a great job following the Constitution. So I want to see more freedom, more liberty, more Constitution overall. And then the third big one, and these are all kind of tied together, but it's the economics and the taxing and spending and printing money from thin air. That's very destructive. The printing of money from thin air is basically making the money fake and making everybody poorer. And so is the taxation. And then what they do with the money is even worse. They take the money and they add to all of this bureaucracy and tyranny. So I want to see government shrink and follow the Constitution more, give people more power over their own money and their own freedom. Let them make their own decisions with how they want to spend their own money. Let them make their own decisions about how they want to run their lives.
Well, what you just mentioned too with economics and the money printing, I mean, that's all Federal Reserve, which is a charter, and it's the third, I shouldn't say attempt, but the third installation of central banking in the United States, and the longest that it's lasted. I'm curious why we don't have any politicians calling for ending the charter and trying to figure out different solutions, whether or not it's possibly the ideas that like John F. Kennedy Jr. was apparently supposedly talking about issuing a U.S. note that was going to be backed by silver, that would be issued by our Treasury versus the Federal Reserve, which has nothing to do with our federal government. I've interviewed G. Edward Griffin a couple of times, and I'm a big fan of The Creature from Jekyll Island, so I always try to promote those ideals as well, and I'm sure you'd agree.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, it'd be great to go back to some kind of more sound money. And I don't, you know, I think the politicians aren't talking about it because they just don't understand it. They a lot of these folks aren't that deep of thinkers. You know, they're not talking about this stuff. My average regular people that I meet at campaign events, I think about this stuff more. You know, every meeting there's going to be somebody, you know, talking because they listen to people like you, probably some of your fans, people are aware of this. I'll get, 10, 20%, depending on the audience on the low end, who understand things like the Federal Reserve. But politicians, they don't tend to get it. And if they do, they probably are benefiting from it anyway. So they have a vested interest in keeping the system the way that it is. But everybody should understand these things, and they should understand the shenanigans going on with money and why it's broken and how politicians broke it and how we can fix it.
We could definitely fix it. It just takes people standing up. And I have this thing that I like to say, Bruce, and I always say it to manifest it. I like the power of speech, that we could speak things into existence. And when enough people take a stand, nothing can stand against the people. And then I always have to add, and we can peacefully change the world. Now, I don't always think that's going to be an option, but I'm not one to promote any sort of violence or anything to that effect. But I'm also the type of person who's don't mistake my kindness for weakness mentality. And what I was getting at earlier with the FBI leaked documents, supposedly that was released via Project Veritas, was militia violent extremists, MVEs, that they would designate as domestic terrorists. And the alarming thing is, it's a lot of the verbiage, and this was supposed to be for internal use only. A lot of the verbiage was dealing with a lot of the things that me and you talked about, admiring and standing up for the things that the founding fathers fought for, coming at this from an anti-federalist perspective. If you have 1776 imagery, a Gadsden flag with the rattlesnake and the "Don't Tread on Me," or the early Betsy Ross flag, these individuals are being, if this information is true, and Project Veritas seems to be a really valid media agency in these days and age. It actually seems to be one of the most valid, and they seem to fact check what they're putting out before it comes out. So I'm finding that kind of stuff alarming. So having someone like you potentially being in the U.S. Senate, along with people like Rand Paul, I have hope for politics, which doesn't say a whole lot, but I have hope.
Yeah, it's easy to get jaded. I can sympathize. Some of my best supporters are people who don't vote. They say, I just don't believe in anything, Bruce. I don't want to vote for you. I don't want to vote for the system. I don't want to be even part of it. And I don't even think you should even be trying to change it. And I sympathize with that. I really do. It is easy to do that, but it does matter.
What do you say to people like that, though? This is a really good opportunity, because I think a lot of people who watch my show, myself included, are in that position. And I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I've interviewed Adam Kokesh, who was running for president with the Libertarian Party, John McAfee. I've interviewed a couple guys running for Senate, Congress. My friend Ammon Bundy is running for governor in Idaho. So I get why people are running for political office and want to do that change, but a lot of those individuals aren't going to get support from their friends because of their ideologies. What are your thoughts on that?
I say, it does matter. It's easy to get jaded. It's easy to think it doesn't matter, but it really does. This vote that they just did 2 weeks ago is a perfect example. That came down to one vote. It came down to one vote. My opponent, Maggie Hassan, who in the general election, if I'm fortunate enough to make it to the general election, she voted for it. I would have voted against it. And so that's something that matters. Those 87,000 IRS agents, that came down to one vote.
Are you talking about the Inflation Reduction Act?
Yeah, that so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which will actually increase inflation. Yeah. And it's a bunch of Green New Deal boondoggles for crony contractors, and adds 87,000 IRS agents. So that matters. I mean, that that one thing alone would be worth voting for me, just to, if you know, to have somebody be able to vote against something like that. But I think that in the next 6 years, we're going to have a lot more important votes than that. We're going to be facing some real crisis in our country, I'm afraid.
Well, the sad thing is too, if we have the party politics come into play like we did with this particular bill. I mean, this is it was split 50-50, and it took the vice president with her cackle of a laugh to pass it through, because she was so happy that she was the one that got to be able to push it through. But that shows the division that we have in our country. I mean, there's mention of civil war. You look at the fourth turning and they talk about that as being a potential, but I don't know how we're not divided like we were back in the early portion of our history, where it was like north and south. Like, if we look at everything as being blue and red, everything is really more purple.
Yeah.
You know, it's like your neighbor. Are we going to be like fighting our neighbors? You know, our loved ones? We're too interconnected. That's why I say purple. It's no blue or red. It's purple. And we're just, the idea of that kind of traditional, what we think of as a civil war, I don't see as, you know, taking place in those manners.
Yeah, we really need to come together. We can't have half the nation hating the other half and half of the nation believing something is what is true is different. We can't even agree on what's true. I get comments on my Facebook page. People have completely different ideas of what reality is. It's not just a disagreement about what happened with the election. It's total disagreements about what's even real. And that doesn't make sense. The only way to get along with that is to just have people leave each other alone. You know, so I try and urge people on the left. It's just like, you may think I'm a crazy redneck, but please just leave me alone, because the alternative is going to be bloodshed. You know, you can't tell people what to do. There's certain people like me who we're not going to wear a mask again, and we're not going to take an injection in our arm, and we're just not. And you're going to have to fight us and kill us, and we might kill you back, or you can just shut up and mind your own business. And that's the choice that the left is facing and what America is facing. We're done. We're tired of having our businesses shut down. We're tired of, you know, having our nurses fired, having our kids wear a political signal. We're not doing it anymore. We're just not going to do it. And I don't care if you like Fauci or you think he's got a good idea or whatever. I don't care about your excuses. I'm not doing it. You've got to make a choice, if you're on the left, of whether, you know, how much violence you're willing to do. And I would suggest you do none and just back off and mind your own business and stop stealing my money, stop pointing guns in my face, and mind your own business. And if you want to try and convince me to follow your church of woke and listen to Fauci, you can do it like an adult, and you can try and convince me with your words. Write me a letter, convince me, make a good video. And if you make your case, then I'll go listen to Fauci. If you don't, then buzz off and leave me alone and let me mind my own business.
So looking through your views, I mean, obviously, I know that you're pro Bitcoin and pro crypto, and looking at this video that's listed here, right below the CBD category, I can tell that you are not for CBDCs. What are your thoughts with the idea of the direction that we're taking by trying to introduce a CBDC? Yeah,
you know, I'm glad you mentioned it, because CBDCs are one of the most evil, insidious things out there going on in government. And that says a lot. There's a lot of evil things going on. But what's sneaky about CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, is that people don't realize just how dangerous these are. What central bank digital currency allows, one, it's, you know, your classic bad fiat. It's junky money, phony money that they print, and they try and make it look like a digital currency because it's digital. But it's issued by a central bank. So problem number one is that it's got this scammy / evil money backing it. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is that because it's issued by the government, they can just turn a knob and shut your money off.
Like Canada, like what happened with the Canadian farmer or the Freedom Convoy, people donating just to help out a cause that they believe in. And yeah,
Trudeau shut them off. He shut off their Venmos, and he shut off their MasterCard and Visa. And with a CBDC, he wouldn't need to do that step. He could shut off their money at the root forever without any third party. It would just be him. And then who are you going to sue? Who are you going to switch to? You're done.
You lose privacy, you complete tracking and surveillance. It's, you know, it's awful. And then I think about things like the CBDC in combination with a social credit system and or a digital ID, which nobody now is talking about digital ID. Everybody's focusing on all these other different areas. And I think the digital ID is equally as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than the CBDC. Because I feel like the digital ID will be your entry to a CBDC. So if they can cut you off at the head, you're not going to interact. And it's an interesting thing. So that's why, you know, it's like, I have this mentality of, part of me is like, more people like yourself and myself need to attempt to run for political office and try to make a change from within. And then the other part of me is like, we just need to do what Thomas Jefferson said and abolish the government and form a new one.
Right.
So we're at this really pivotal period in history, and the CBDCs is not a good direction. The SEC is another thing that I think is really stifling cryptocurrency. And I know that you're a member of the SEC FINRA, which I'm not really super familiar with it, but it sounds like you're dealing with regulated securities.
Yeah, in the United States, everybody who deals with securities has to be licensed. So there's about 300,000 people licensed. I've been licensed with the SEC for my whole career, like 29 years. So I'm very familiar with these folks. And I believe the whole thing should be abolished. I've called for abolishing the SEC. It hasn't done its job, or its, you know, stated goal of kind of protecting investors. And it's a real hindrance now. It's not necessary. We would never think about having it right now. This was invented in an era long before computers, the internet, you know, different kinds of fraud. It wasn't even a good idea then, but it's even more outdated than it was. It's 85 years old now. And so I'm a big believer that individuals should be able to make the investments that they want. And the economy would be a lot better if we had more freedom for people to make investments. So I'd be all in favor of eliminating the thing entirely. But short of that, I'd be in favor of doing things like, you know, increasing Reg CF. It's at 5 million, you know, increase that to 100 or something like that. Get rid of accredited investor rules, get rid of some of the AML KYC, which isn't so much SEC, but, you know, accredited investor rules are, you know, there's a lot of inefficiencies in the markets, and it just doesn't help. It doesn't help the economy, doesn't help jobs, doesn't help business. We could scrap the entire thing, and I don't think you'd have any material negative effect. I don't think, it's not like if you scrapped it, a bunch of people are going to start losing money on fraud or something like that. I think things would just be better and work smoother if we got rid of all of these agencies.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I'm curious what your thoughts are. What's going to happen with the SEC XRP case, XRP library case? Do you think the library case will end before the XRP? I know now Dragon Chain is being brought into the mix. What are your thoughts with the SEC coming after cryptocurrencies and saying that these are securities? And I know some of them are. I do, you know, some of them legitimately are, but not in the case of library. I don't see how it fits the category, especially if the attorneys from the SEC have admitted that it's being used for use case. The utility is actually being utilized, but the idea that a lawyer from the SEC is speaking to a judge about any type of if one person is thinking that there's going to be a return on that investment, it makes it a security. And they were even mentioning it didn't even regard, like, utility didn't matter.
Yeah,
which is just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, speculation on investment alone isn't enough to make it a security, because, you know, Beanie Babies were security. Comic books are not a security. Those you speculate on investment. The problem is not so much the definition. I mean, the definition is a problem, but what's the real problem is that it even matters. What we should have it say, instead of saying, well, let's avoid being a security, or is this a security or not, we should be in a world where we say, sure, it's a security, who cares? And there's no paperwork or anything. You know, like equity. Equity is definitely a security. If I say I'm going to give you 10% of my business, that's definitely a security. And we should be in a world where it doesn't matter, where I could go on here and sell it to your people if they want to buy it, or sell it to you and you could transfer it. We shouldn't have any rules about that at all. The market should be able to decide. And if it's a junky investment, then it's a junky investment. If it's a good investment, it's a good investment. We don't need mother government in between, some nanny state like, oh, hey, what are you doing there? Let me get in between you two consenting adults in your voluntary transaction. We don't need it.
No, I agree. And I got a question to ask you about taxes. Now, you mentioned, and this is one thing that I try to make sure that I'm reporting as much correct information as I can. And with the not so reducing Inflation Act and the idea of having a budget to hire 87,000 new IRS agents. A lot of individuals think that this is just going to happen like tomorrow. And they actually think, like, the videos that they saw about training, like some sort of IRS law enforcement training, apparently was misused, as far as it was it had nothing to do with what people are connecting it with. Now, I'm not a fan of the IRS, but the other thing is too, like, this whole 87,000 thing is supposed to be spread out within 10 years. And in that 10 years, you're already talking about a reduction of IRS employees. Half of the IRS employees will be retiring in the next 4 years. So it's not as if we're going to be like getting a militarized IRS force going on, like some people are speculating. But I'm curious, you have your 321 universal. Every time I say universal basic, I want to add other words to it, but you've got the UB tax cut, the universal basic tax cut, 321 universal basic tax cut. It's a lot of verbiage, but what exactly is this in your words?
Yeah, so 321 is 300,000 in business income, 200,000 in personal income, 100,000 in investment income. So what it would do, it would eliminate all the taxes on the first $300,000 in business income that anybody gets from their small business or large business, whatever. This goes all the way up. Even if you make $1 million, it's the first 300,000 that's zero taxes, and the first 200,000 in income. So if you make 300,000, the first 200,000 is tax free. If you make less than 200,000, you get no taxes, and 100,000 in investments. So if you have real estate or Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever, and you have gains, your first $100,000 would be tax free. And the way you cover this cost is through spending cuts, including this bill. This bill that they just passed would cover it just for about a year. And, the money we sent BlackRock could cover it for almost another year. And, drone bombings and things like that. Pretty quickly, you could cover this for 5 years or so pretty easily. And I see it as a way to rebuild the middle class. You can't have no taxes forever. I think a graduated tax rate is better, or flat tax, but it's a great illustration of just how much money they're spending on these other things. And this is something that would have a meaningful impact for the middle class. There's a lot of people who could really do a lot with that money if we let them have it. So that's what the plan is. 321 universal basic tax cut. I'd like to see a tax cut for everybody. And this is a tax cut for the rich and the middle class, but it's mainly the middle class. This could really rebuild the middle class.
No, it sounds like a good plan. I mean, I'm definitely one of these individuals that our form of taxation is definitely theft. I wouldn't have a problem with taxes if I knew where the money was going, not paying back interest to the Federal Reserve for printing up money that I didn't ask to be printed up, a plethora of things. And plus, I like the idea of bringing things to a local level, your local community, where you build up from your local city, town, county, state. So it's a bottom up system versus a top down system, which is, I think, the way that the federal government has interacted. Unfortunately, something else that I thought was really cool, I was noticing on your Twitter account. This was, I guess, was at a debate.
Yeah,
and you were asked about what government agency do you want to cut, and obviously it says here your answer is BlackRock, but I found that to be fascinating, and probably words that might get you shot. What are your overall thoughts about BlackRock? And before you answer that, something I just found out recently, and I don't even know how this got past me, is BlackRock's Aladdin, this trading bot or AI, something that is basically in charge of something like $21 trillion worth of assets globally, which is insanely sick to think about. And then, like, our own, I shouldn't say our government, but our very own Federal Reserve brought Mr. Larry Fink and his Aladdin and the BlackRocks into what they're doing to help our economy, which I found to be very interesting. Now, Coinbase is partnering with what I call the devil. But what are your thoughts on overall with what BlackRock is doing?
Yeah, it's crazy. They're buying up all the houses in America, and we're giving them our money from the taxes and from this printing of money from thin air. It's really, really absurd. $500 billion. This is the problem with economics and with people not understanding math. People don't get how much money that is. That is an astronomical amount of money. You know, if Jesus Christ would have started burning $1,000 a minute when Jesus was alive to today, you wouldn't even be close to coming into $500 billion. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, what did I've done them, you know, there's all kinds of fun math you can do. I've done them. What was it? I figured out, I mean, try and figure out like $10 million schools, how many, or if you said you broke that down into $10 million grants and figure it out, it ends up being these huge numbers. You know, you could have massive impact. Not that you should. I mean, you should just let everybody have their own money, but it's an incredible amount of money that they're stealing from the people to give this one giant corporation, you know, this outsized, you know, control. It's just really bizarre, and it doesn't belong that way. We shouldn't have that. It's very bad for the economy and bad for the Americans.
Well, not only that, but I mean, when I'm talking about this Aladdin bot and how much money that BlackRock is in charge of, and the positions it's giving them on different boards as to be able to make decisions for companies and point towards a direction that they want these organizations, these corporations to go to. The amount of money that they're dealing with is very comparable to the GDP of the United States.
Oh yeah,
which is
like there's only a handful of firms that control all this stuff. Yeah,
and it's crazy. And then you start thinking about Vanguard, and it's like I don't even know what's real. You know, who there's a lack of information about what's available for BlackRock. And I did hear something, and maybe you could tell me if this is correct. Is there supposed to be some sort of legislation introduced, or are there some politicians that are trying to break up BlackRock?
Not that I don't know anything super, you know, far along on that. You know, there's a lot of companies that have talked, or a lot of people have talked about it, but you know, that's a possibility, some kind of antitrust. I mean, the best way to break them up or is just to reduce their power. You know, we don't need to break them up. Just stop giving them billions and billions, hundreds and hundreds of billions of our money, and let the market decide. You know, most of these big banks wouldn't even be in existence if we hadn't given them bailouts in 2008. I lost your sound.
I thought I was unmuted. I apologize every once in a while, and I have to go back through different browsers. The 2008 crash should have been the end of the system.
Yeah,
should have 100% should have been the end of the system, and we basically put everything on life support.
Yep.
With the quantitative easing, zombie banks, and then we had 2019 the inverted yield curve, which was pointing towards a recession, which we apparently did experience in 2020, but I didn't know we did, and most people didn't either, because of all the money printing that was going on with the quantitative easing infinity. Which is absolutely insane. So I would definitely love to be able to see politicians who think the way that you think in office. We need more people. It's sad that we don't have politicians now speaking out. Very many politicians speaking out. It seems like Rand Paul is like a rare breed now.
Yeah, Rand Paul is one of my favorites. I like him.
He's being attacked like crazy for the things that he's saying.
Of course.
Which is really sad. I mean, and again, either you get people like Rand Paul who make sense, or you get some of these politicians that associate themselves with the Q movement, and they just look asinine, which is very unfortunate as well. But go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. Yeah, I like Rand Paul a lot. He's probably, a lot of people ask me who I would be like if I were to get down there. Rand Paul is the closest senator.
Okay, cool. Well, did you have, I had a few, questions that weren't 100% related to your campaign or anything specific that I want to ask you before we wrap up, but do you have anything that you want to add in regards to your run for Senate that we didn't cover, or anything that you want to highlight, or any final thoughts that you want to give people in regards to your run for Senate?
Yeah, I mean, just if they're in New Hampshire, the primary is September 13th. So if you're registered as either an independent or a Republican, or if you're a Democrat, you can switch over just to vote for me. Switch over and vote in that primary. I should actually do that because I would say if you're a Democrat, you probably would. I think I'll be better than than the other people. There's a lot of things that they hate about Republicans that they might not hate as much about me. Like I'm anti-war, for example, and I'm against censorship, and these are things that Democrats should be. But yeah, September 13th, that's when the primary is. So I appreciate the votes, and anybody who wants to share my content or donate or volunteer or anything, that's more than welcome as well.
Now, I wanted to, and I appreciate you explaining that, and I appreciate you taking the time to explain everything about your run for Senate. You've been involved in crypto for quite some time. When did you get involved in crypto, and what was it that drove you to becoming such a big advocate for Bitcoin and decentralized cryptocurrencies?
Yeah, it's a great question. I started with Liberty first. I got involved in Liberty and got interested in Ron Paul and the properties of libertarianism and freedom. And that crowd, a lot of the New Hampshire people, actually, New Hampshire Free Staters and the Pork Fest people. The Pork Fest is the first place I heard about Bitcoin. Charlie Schramm and Roger Ver and Eric Voorhees came there in 2012 and spoke about Bitcoin. And so the Pork Festers and the Free Staters were the first people that I heard talking about Bitcoin. And I got into it, kind of speculating, messing around, but pretty quickly I said, boy, this is something fascinating. This is going to be a big deal. I feel like it's like the internet or something. So I jumped in full time and did it ever since.
That was 2012.
Yeah, I was in full time by 2013. And, so yeah, it's been a great adventure. I've had a front row seat in the crypto space ever since. So really enjoyed it.
And you've met a lot of the other OGs in the space. So I have to ask you, I mean, even as a host or co-host of the Satoshi Roundtable, which I would love to attend, and I wouldn't attend as media because I know media aren't allowed, or I'm not allowed to report. But I'm curious, do you have any inclination as to who Satoshi Nakamoto is?
I don't think so. Yeah, I just leave it at that. I think about it like a lot of people do. And I especially early on, I thought about it more, but, until Satoshi comes forward with, rock solid proof and wants to be revealed, I don't really even want to speculate, because he or she wants to be private, then I'll respect that. And I like it the way it is.
I respect that too, but I have to ask, just because you're such an OG, I mean, you could have been in a conversation with Satoshi. Somebody could have revealed information to you. And even if they did, it's not that you would answer the question 100% honestly, because if I knew who Satoshi was, I probably wouldn't let others know as well.
Yeah.
So I'm in the same boat. Well, now, one of the things I did ask you before we started recording, and I'm really fascinated by this. I'm a comic book fan myself. I grew up on comic books. I was more of a Marvel fan. I was more into the mutants and the X-Men element than I was like your traditional superheroes. But I've noticed throughout the years, a lot of times when I see pictures of you, you have one of those shields in your hand, one of those awesome Captain American shields. And then I was listening to you talk about Ron Paul and your love for liberty. And it kind of like is starting to connect and making a lot more sense. But what is your fascination specifically with the Captain America shield?
Well, I'm a super all-round comic book geek. I love comics. If this room out here that you can't see is just filled with graphic novels and art. I've got some art that I'm going to hang in here. And so I just love comic books overall. And, I've been a Marvel fan too. I was a big X-Men fan, Iron Man. I wasn't actually a super huge Captain America fan, but Captain America it's got this cool, Superman and Captain America both have these cool kind of iconic looks, so I have a lot of Superman stuff. And then I had this blue shield from the Winter Soldier movie, which I love because he's fighting the government. So that's like perfect for me. It's very few people would recognize the difference between these two shields. The one on the top being the Winter Soldier shield, and then this one being your classic one. But I had this one for years, and nobody really noticed that it's different. But this is the classic Captain America. And I just got this actually. I got that for the campaign, kind of right before the campaign. It makes kind of a fun sort of decoration that ties in my love for comic books with my, sort of the red, white, and blue, sort of makes for a nice background.
Is that a gamer chair with the Captain America shield on it too?
Yeah, it is. It is. And I've got some of these guys on the walls, some Sideshow, some Superman and stuff. Over here I have Batman, and then out there is the Hulk. And so I love that stuff, and it's interesting because there's so many great stories, whether it's V for Vendetta, or
well, that's what I was going to ask you. Right underneath the Superman, right above the Captain America chair, is that V?
Him. Yep, that's V. Yep.
Yeah. See, I was trying to scope out, and it looks like below that, it looks like an Incredible Hulk comic with a white background and black writing.
Yep, it's got Hulk, and then over here is the Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes, and this guy is the Fallout 4. Up here is a picture of my family with Stan Lee, and there's a Stan Lee sideshow miniature right up here. You can't really see it on the video, but
that is cool though. Stan Lee.
Yeah, what a legend. I'm so glad we got to meet him while he was around. That was one of his very last events, and we, you kind of knew. I think he was in his 90s, so this was just a couple of years ago. So, he made one last trip. What a guy. Here he was in his 90s, and he says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make one last trip and go to every comic book convention one more time. I mean, what a guy. What a guy.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And he put out some awesome stories and put together some awesome teams of writers and artists, and great memories growing up.
Yeah. And a heck of a CEO also. He's known as this creative guy. Here's this guy, he created, Spider-Man and Hulk and all these super iconic things, but he was also a badass businessman. I mean, if he was in his prime today, he'd be at the cutting edge of cryptocurrency or something else. I mean, he was a great CEO as well. Very, very creative. So props to Stan Lee, one of the greatest.
Props to Stan Lee. I guess the last question I want to ask you, and this is something that I'm not super familiar with, and it kind of relates back to your run for U.S. Senate. You said the primaries are on September the 13th?
Yes.
And depending on how you do in the primaries, or depending on how you do on September 13th, will determine whether you move forward?
Right. Yep. So it's so this is the GOP primary. The Democrat
is when they select who would be the Republican candidate for the Senate run in New Hampshire.
Exactly. The Democrat is going to be the incumbent, Maggie Hassan, who's already in office, and then whichever Republican of the four of us in this primary, or there's more like 10, but there's the 4 or 5 viable candidates. Whichever one of those wins gets the Republican nomination, then goes on to face her in the general election in November.
Okay, cool. How do you think you're going to fare on September the 13th?
It's anybody's game. It's a really weird race. Usually these are decided by now, and there's a bunch of establishment money or something. I'm kind of polling in like third, distant third by some, depending on which one, but it's anybody's game. 39% is undecided. I have more money in the bank than all the other candidates combined. I have more social media than all the candidates combined. Crushing it on social, crushing it on YouTube and in-person events, and we're doing mailers and things like that. So who knows, anything can happen. But whoever wins this has a good chance of winning the general, and if I win it, I have a very good chance of winning the general election because I can bring in the most independents. So it's actually something that I could totally win and end up being the next senator from New Hampshire.
Okay, well, then let me ask 2 things. One, you fare well on September 13th, and you're going to be going for the actual elections. I want to bring you back on the show. Would you be cool with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then the next question would be, if things do not fare well, what is going to be your future in politics, Mr. Bruce Fenton?
Well, I'm going to keep fighting for liberty. I'm a Bitcoiner, and I have my businesses and stuff. I'm going to fight for liberty no matter what, whether I win or don't win. I'm going to still fight for liberty. I want to make an organization in New Hampshire that fights for liberty, gets more freedom-oriented people elected. I've learned a lot about elections no matter what. I've got a very good organization of supporters. Whether I win or don't, I'm going to have those supporters who are going to be able to help people, win and bring forth liberty and freedom in America.
Somebody who I forgot to mention, and I'm not sure of your guys' relationship, but Brock Pierce, he ran for president with the United States. I think he's running for governor or some position in Vermont, if I'm not mistaken, maybe Rhode Island.
Yeah, he was going to run for senator in Vermont. Yeah, I'm friends with Brock. I've known Brock for years.
Did he influence you at all into wanting to get into politics?
Yeah, a little bit, actually. It's funny. He came down to our Satoshi roundtable, and he was really giving me. He was one of the people who was really giving me a hard time about running on this race. He was really convinced. He's like, "You got to do it. You got to do it. You got to do it."
He's trying to get everybody to.
Yeah, he tried to get everybody to do. He's very convincing. He's very convincing guy.
He's like, I will help fund your campaign, and it was like, it made me think, like, should I run for office? But no, ultimately I haven't made that jump yet. If I do something like that, I would want to do something more on the local stage. I feel as if I would have more of an impact in my local area than I would on the national stage. And that's one of the reasons why I try to push for the whole bottom up versus top down mentality.
Yeah, local politics is great. Your school board, your regular local elections, they're really important.
That's where the real changes take place, in my opinion.
Yeah,
but we definitely need some more distinguished and honorable, liberty-loving, freedom-loving individuals in not only the Senate, but our Congress as well.
Yes.
So I'm going to have a link down below for brucefenton.com where people can find all the information on your run for Senate, which will also, I'll have a link for your YouTube channel, which I encourage people to check out because there's a lot more information there. They can follow you over on your Twitter account at Bruce Fenton. There'll be a lot of information about your run for U.S. Senate. And I will include a link down below for the Cypherpunk Manifesto as well. I do really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Hopefully things go well with you on the 13th of September and we can bring you back on and talk about what's happening moving forward. But do you have anything you want to add before we do wrap up today, Bruce?
No, thanks a lot for the time. Anybody who wants to connect, I'm all over social media, Twitter and so on, Bruce Fenton. And that's my website. And, we love to get together with people in person in New Hampshire. And this is good stuff. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Bruce. If you could just bear with me 1 second, I'm going to wrap up the recording. So, ladies and gentlemen, I do appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're not subscribed, make sure you are subscribed. Check out all the links for everything that I shared on today's show. If you happen to be in New Hampshire and you are able to vote and you're registered to vote, make sure you vote for Bruce Fenton. And hopefully everything will go well on September 13th, and he'll be back on the show talking about what's going on for the midterm elections. I will leave you with this as I leave you always. I encourage everyone to be blessed, be the change, and practice change.